Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, one and all, to another episode of Wick TV, an cross-ideological space where certainty comes to die. We bring together people from many different backgrounds, many different and diverse um, experiences, and we get them to talk about topics that range from political to cultural, silly to serious. I just want to inform you all today's topic and today's panel was not put together by me. JohnnyScarlett takes all the credit here for putting together the prompt, putting together the guest list, and handling that side of things. So I'm very grateful to you for trusting me with this opportunity to moderate. And so I just wanted to give credit where credit's due. No stolen valor here. So thank you once again. We are waiting on one more individual, a last minute replacement, Tuna Chip, and they'll be here shortly. But yeah, let's just kind of get started, gang. So, what are we talking about today? Well, we are talking about neopronouns in school being enforced by people of authority. Is it okay that your boss or someone's teacher or someone who is in a position of authority over you enforces the use of neopronouns for them? Is that a power dynamic issue or is it just common courtesy? Is it just something that we should be doing anyway? If someone asks you to refer to them by a certain pronoun, should we just, again, as a matter of course, accept that? We'll talk about this as we go. But first, I want to give the floor over to B Word to start us off. What do you think, B Word?
Hey everybody, I'm Be Weird. I think that it is important that we respect people's policies, procedures, and especially when it comes to gender identity or any type of protected class. And this is the type of thing that you sign on for when you subscribe to an organization. You subscribe to their beliefs and their policies. And I think it's important that if you have an issue with something, that you work within that organization to try to better understand maybe where it's coming from or what have you. And honestly, pronouns are pretty low bar as far as it comes to compelled speech, so I'm not really sure there's a big ask being there. So yeah, I'm a poet from Montreal. You can check me out on twitch.tv/beweird.
Be Weird. Apologies. For whatever reason, I thought it was pronounced B Word, but I shouldn't have because we were on my show Monday. So apologies for that. Next up, first time guest, hopefully not last time guest. We'll see how it goes. Gremloe, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, it's like B Word says, kind of a low bar. If we're talking about uh, enforcing using specific pronouns,
I
that's
kid
where
you
I
not,
start
I thought
to
this
have an
was
issue, like
about
limiting the
education only.
conversation. As far as just being courteous and respectful to people, I think that's it's a very, very low bar. A lot of these conversations get bogged down in conspiracism and a lot of alt-right rhetoric. So I'm excited to see how far we drift into that.
Me too. I'm never sure
Interesting.
how on the rails my discussions are going
How
to
to make
take,
up that
right?
opening argument
It really
on the fly.
depends. And considering I didn't put this panel together, I'm not sure what everyone here is going to go with. So we'll find out. GSU, Mr. Gambit, please. What do
This
you
should be
think?
interesting.
Cool. Let's put this conversation on the
Cheers,
rails.
chat.
Um, so I think generally speaking, neo pronouns are more wide, I guess. Xenogender, I think it's bad for trans people completely. I don't even think we should consider these things under the trans umbrella. I think it plays into the hands of a lots of tropes that are used to attack trans people. I don't think it has any value whatsoever.
Wow.
So I just think this makes it particularly much harder for trans people to gain legislation and more good standing in our society. It was hard enough to separate gender from sex to a lot of people. The idea that we're gonna even
Last time we
further
introduced
separate
ourselves.
gender from even any type of reality is a monstrosity to me. Um, so yeah, I think
A
generally speaking,
monstrosity.
we can have areas like Discord where people can put together their
Oh.
communities and they can say, "Hey, here we use neo pronouns and those type of things." But institutions of higher learning or institutions of learning, I think we talked today about how the U.S. has fallen behind several of our other counterpart countries in education. And I think that things like this, such as introducing
Let's spark up chat.
neopronouns into the conversation of academics, is definitely red fruit to make us go further and further behind.
Okay,
Further
well,
behind.
thank you for
We're
that. We'll
regressing.
see how it goes. We'll get into it, I am sure. Next up, again, the person responsible for all of this, and you get the credit or the blame, Johnny. Johnny
Should have
Scarlett, what do you
the
think?
most developed argument. I'm curious.
Okay. So I did put this together because I could have my mind changed on it, right? I've generally, throughout the history of neopronouns becoming a bigger conversation, been very neutral on them. My particular issue with what we're talking about tonight is that I found a real world example of a teacher doing what I think is enforcing their own neopronouns onto their students. They have a poster in their classroom that reminds the students to use their neopronouns, which are
Yeah, it's pretty
zer.
weird.
I think that I'm going to stick to they, them for this person for tonight because I haven't practiced those pronouns personally. But it's less of a conversation about whether, to me, whether neopronouns are valid or useful, although largely I don't think they're very useful, frankly. It's more of a conversation about power dynamics to me.
Okay, well, thank you
Interesting.
again for all you've done
Interesting
here.
take.
We will get into it. I'm sure there's lots of directions we can go. I will have questions as we go as well, and we will get this done. Next up, another first-time guest,
Before
hopefully
arguments.
not last time, and
What?
another semi-last-minute replacement, Luca. Hello.
Oh, true.
Hi there. My name is Luca. My opinion is that neopronouns in classrooms aren't really an especially big deal, and that a teacher enforcing their usage is pretty reasonable. I don't think it should be like demanded for other children and students that don't really have any reason to use them, but I don't really see any reason to disagree with the usage if someone deems it appropriate. They're not really difficult, they don't undercut the primary purpose of regular pronouns, and they're not really exclusive to people who are trans. I think asking students to politely refer to a teacher by the pronouns they prefer is no different from asking students not to intentionally call little Timmy a girl or little Hannah a boy. It's a simple matter of respect, and I think everybody on this panel can probably agree that respect for the individual is a pretty important thing for kids to learn. I hope that we can keep this conversation grounded firmly in whether or not neopronouns are something that a teacher can ask students to respect to use appropriately to refer to others. I sincerely hope that we can avoid turning the conversation into a debate about the validity or morality of trans identities, since some of us might not see eye to eye, and it probably will just detract from the actual conversation.
Well, I like this one.
Well, you know what? We can hope, but I don't know if that's going to be a thing. We'll find out. I will do my best. Next up, Tuna Chip. Hello.
Had a couple rough weeks,
Hey,
but
what's
back
going
in the
on?
saddle.
Bit of a late entry myself, but I have
poetry.
some opinions on
New music.
neopronouns, and I'm familiar with this particular case as well.
Poetry
My
slam's coming
number
up.
one thing would say that neopronouns and the primary three
Is that your
gender
man?
pronouns that get used in the United States right now, but as well as Canada and everything, are fundamentally different. The line between a personal identity and a social identity is a pretty meaningful one, and I think that the relationship that a teacher has as a person, and then also as a sort of mentor that is inviting and teaching children how to exist inside of the social world, there's a line there, and I think that the enforcement of neopronouns would especially cross it, but even the exposure and the
Socialization.
highlighting neopronouns as being similar to gendered pronouns is itself actually a corrupting influence. Even coming as a
Wow.
person is extremely pro-trans. I think that there's a big difference there that needs to be taught if you're going to teach it. So neopronouns are a
worries,
tricky
Billy.
subject, especially with the power dynamic between kids and teachers. That's pretty much it.
Okay,
Wow.
excellent. Well, again,
This
just
is
try
my
to
first
try
seeing,
to be
yeah.
respectful. You can get loud, you can get spicy. That's fine. Nothing tossed, nothing like that. But otherwise, just kind of get to it. I will start off with a question for those of you who think this is okay, who think that the teacher enforcing the use of the pronouns that they, I'm sorry, I'm just going to use they, I'm sorry. They prefer is okay. Would you feel the same way if they went by the pronoun it? If they wanted the kids to call them an it, do you think that would change your opinion, or do you think that that doesn't matter? We should respect it regardless.
That,
Viewer, do you want to take that one first?
yeah, that would change my opinion, just because we have connotations with the word it. People have relationship to how someone might be referred to as it. I'm not too sure of anybody who is self-identifying as it. If that were the case, I think it'd be a very big ask, because I think some people might feel uncomfortable with that. It has the potential to dehumanize them, right? Like, even if someone's like, yes, I would like to feel that dehumanization, I don't think us as a society should be like enculturating that to learners. And in that case, you'd have to escalate that. That's a tough ask.
Is that kind of?
I don't care.
Fair
Here's
enough.
the thing.
Oh, okay.
When we talk about like specifically the it one, because this is like a very relevant topic to neopronouns, because we don't associate any of these neopronouns with personhood. But the person who wants to, associate their identity with any of these neopronouns does. So whether or not we as individuals or as a, a governing body over like a school administration feel that it's dehumanizing or that it may confuse, their students, that doesn't really matter. If we don't do it, it does invalidate that person. Whether or not we feel icky about it doesn't really matter, because that person is going to feel invalidated. They're going to feel dehumanized, even if they don't necessarily associate themselves with a pronoun that is typically associated with personhood. So ultimately, it doesn't matter. Really, the responses to neopronouns ultimately boil down to they're kind of cringy, but I think we can let people with neopronouns be cringy.
Yeah, I would push back on that, but someone else has an opinion, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I have a problem with some of these ground rules. So I just want to call out the problems that I'm perceiving, and we'll see where that goes. Someone was like, "Hey, we shouldn't attack." How I didn't forget exactly. I can't, for some reason I can't see his face either. That's why I tried to turn my camera on and off, but I can't see Tuna Chip. So just FYI, I can't see you. So if you're trying to like signal or something, I can't.
Oh no, I mean I can see you. I can see you, so I'll see you talking to me. If you
Cool,
want
cool,
a
cool.
description of me, I have a
Okay,
mustache.
we
no,
don't
no,
we
you're
don't
fine.
need the description. Come on,
Yeah, we're
skip
fine.
the part.
But
Yeah.
like one of the
Some
things I
alt
think it
text
was
stuff.
that you said is like we shouldn't attack like the person or something. One of the things, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what Gremloe just said. One of the things that's becoming increasingly difficult in conversations is any disagreement on ideological bounds is seen as disrespect for a person. So I will be disagreeing with your ideas. If any of you take that as disrespect, I see it as something that you need to personally resolve, and it's not something I'm at all interested in trying to resolve for you. So if you think
That's his CS
disagreeing with
statement.
your
His cover your
ideas
ass
is
statement.
disagreeing with you as a person wholly or
It's
some
like,
ways
if you get upset,
reduces
that's your
your
bad.
human value, that's not something that I mean. That's not something that I believe. That's something that you have to solve in yourself. But with that being said, Grimlow, you brought up the idea that, if a lot of us have to feel icky for this one person that we're calling it to feel better, then that's okay, because respect for the individual is paramount. And I'm a person that like really, really believes in respect. I think it should be a somewhat founding principle for relationships, but I think it's disingenuous to ask for a level of respect that would in some ways disrespect everyone else that's involved. So I think we have concepts and ideas
How?
of what we think people are and how we should treat people. And if your neo pronoun um, in some ways violates that, I think it's within respectful bounds for someone to politely not call you that and call you something that seems to be
Gremlow was
more
yeah,
reasonable.
Could
just
you
Gremlow was
elaborate
addressed, so
on
it can go, and then I see you, Luca. So
could you just elaborate on how, referring to someone's, preferred neopronouns, or even if it's just like, non-binary pronouns, may invalidate or disrespect someone within that space, especially if it's like a student? Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I don't think most people would be comfortable with somebody like the prompt that Wick asked, somebody calling people it. I wouldn't. I don't think I take kind to people being referred to as it around me. So that's one example. I mean, pronouns could get more and more ridiculous, obviously, as we've seen, especially when you go into the xenogender sphere. And I think that ridiculousness is a bit degrading to like conversation, especially in an academic setting, right?
No,
I
not
think
really, because like,
Yeah.
well, sorry,
That's
can
how
I
you
just
feel,
hop
right?
in real quick and just address
For
that, and
sure.
then, okay. So first of all, like just referring to it as like ridiculousness, right? We're already treading in like invalidating territory, right? And
For
that's
sure.
just like that's just talking about like rhetoric, right? So we're already like in that territory, and this is not like I don't care about neopronouns, right? If someone wants to do it, they have that freedom to do it. But does that feeling of I don't see how that's, humanized, and does your individual feeling, because there's no data being brought up here about like whether or not the majority of public supports the use of neopronouns. This is an individual argument that you're making of you don't specifically feel like that's, should be in, common parlance, right? Majority of the public doesn't care, you know? It's like saying, okay, well, if when the teacher walks in the first day of class and they write Miss or Mr. or Mix, Sanchez, and saying, well, I don't
I don't
know,
know. Public
Mix
does
and
care.
Mr. or
Parents do
Miss
care.
kind of feels invalidating to me, so I won't do that. Well, doesn't really matter, does it?
It kind of does. So you're touching on this in a thing that matters a lot here, which is that language, and when we're talking about comfort, we're talking about respect. What we're talking about here is personal values. And if the speaker feels like that type of language when referring to other people makes them feel like they are engaging in dehumanization, of course that they have a right to not speak that way. You can make a person feel like they're not allowed to live in line with their values on both directions, both as the person calling someone it and as the person who is being denied the ability to be referred to as it. There's sort of a paradox of respect here, because when you're having a conversation and you're asking somebody to refer to you, you're not just telling them to make you comfortable, you are almost demanding they make you comfortable, because in the instance of the teacher, at least, you have a vested like authority over them. In a lot of relationships, it's fair, but this is one where it's a little bit different. You have to understand that if a child doesn't want to use some language that feels dehumanizing, because it and Zer can feel just as dehumanizing, because the latter one sounds like some alien shit. There's an ability to understand why you're doing something that I think that you owe the person who is being asked to change their language.
There's a
That's why we
difference,
call
though,
it
between
vocal
asking
minority.
someone
They
to
shouldn't do it.
respect it. There's a difference, though. There's a difference between someone not understanding it and you as a position of authority saying, okay, well, let me explain that, right? And then the other hand of that, that other power dynamic where it's a authority figure refusing to do that for a student who is in the, higher power dynamic. So these things don't ultimately matter when we're talking about whether or not a teacher is asking the student body as the person of authority. I like to be referred to as, it, Jaeger, Zizem, doesn't matter, right? If it's a student who's asking this and the teacher refusing to do that, that's unacceptable, right? Just as it's
Sure.
unacceptable for a teacher to say, I want this, and the student to say, no, right? Because there's an entire student body who's okay with this, and there's probably one, two, as there always is, a minority of people who are not okay with this.
I don't know if I'd call it
Oh, because there's a
unacceptable.
word.
This-
There's
yeah,
a word
go
I
ahead.
want to introduce here. There's a word I want to introduce here. That someone in my chat brought up earlier today. It's intersubjectivity. Language is subjective, but it is intersubjective. It has to be a checkmark on everyone who is being communicated to and who are communicating. And so if someone feels in the example specifically of it that they are not comfortable with the actual definitional sort of category of dehumanizing with it in particular, now with a zer pronoun, that's less of a dehumanization problem, I think, and more of a problem of having the permission of people to fundamentally change the way they speak with a brand new word that you made
Okay.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to give some space to Luca, who's been waiting semi-patiently, and see what they have to add to the conversation. Go ahead.
Um, yeah, it's been a couple minutes, but I did want to touch on something that GSU said. So at one point, you did give us a little bit of a mini speech about how any perceived disrespect on our parts is something that we need to reconcile, any uncomfortableness with what you say. But then right after that, you got into another talking point about how people inside the classroom don't need to be made to feel uncomfortable by what someone else says or what someone else identifies as. And it just feels like there's a bit of a disconnect there. I also think that when it comes to social etiquette and pronouns, a lot of people seem to forget that most of us go our entire lives abiding by obvious rules of civility and respect that we just don't really think about that much. Things that we might think of as very, very strange as children that just get taught and ingrained into who we are, that are just not really thought of. Like, you ever sit down at a table and somebody wants to pray before you eat, and you're not a person who prays? You don't stick your middle fingers up in the air and say, "Well, I don't like praying and it makes me
But
uncomfortable."
Luca, the question is, if you know, right, that the other people in your table aren't religious, is it rude to ask them to pray?
Well, not, I guess in this situation, I wouldn't be asking people to pray so much as to respect that I am the person who is praying. So,
I
it's,
understand, like
That's
I
different.
understand, but there,
There's
yeah, there's the
participation.
substantive different. Go ahead.
There's participation when you ask somebody to say it. I'll address your earlier point later because I don't think those two things map up. But you do understand that it would be akin to asking a non-religious person to pray. You're asking them to participate in the things that you ideologically value. It's completely different from sitting quietly by somebody pray and comparing that to somebody being forced to say it to other people. Do you understand how those things are wildly
yeah,
different? Or
I think that's more of a failure of the analogy. I don't really think that, like, the baggage of ideology that comes along with neopronouns is so incredibly destructive and harmful and violent to a person that they
that's
can't
not what we
manage to put
asked
that
you.
aside.
That's not what
Doesn't need to be.
we asked you
Yeah.
specifically. Do you understand that one has
I answered yes.
participation and the other doesn't?
I
Okay.
answered yes. I think it's a failure of the analogy.
I,
So,
And
Oh,
uh,
okay.
to
the
some extent, it's
comparison that I
like,
made was just a bad one. That's what I'm
Sure,
saying.
fair enough. Okay,
Gotcha.
we can move on
Okay,
from this
fair
point.
enough.
I want to get Johnny in and then Tuna, and if anyone else just
to some extent, this is kind of different from the overall trans or queer issues that are generally talked about to me, because this is something where I don't know that you can embody or perform your own gender as something that is fundamentally to the admission of people who use Caesar and who use it, especially, it's fundamentally not something that's associated with humanity in language. And so it sort of feels like having other people perform something for you so that you can feel validated. To me, that's one of my main issues with this, is that this person is generally, this teacher that I'm referencing is generally not, she, this person is not establishing even what their gender is, to my knowledge. I
But is
think
that fair?
maybe
It's
they
like a
consider
TikTok,
themselves.
right? Is that fair to like hold them to the standard? We don't know because it's a TikTok, as I understand it.
not
And
a lot
so
of information.
you got
Sure.
like 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and
You
it's
get a
really hard to kind of do. So is that a fair standard to hold
you
this
get full
person?
minutes. You get full minutes if you want to on TikTok, just so you know. This
Yeah.
TikTok is short.
I'd like to offer like a useful analogy that I just developed in conversation with Barely Political. It might help with this. I think of it like kind of like a handshake at a treehouse. You invite people over, and if you want them to be part of your treehouse, you got to learn the handshake. And some people got some pretty complicated handshakes, but it works for them and it makes sense, and there's good reasons for how they got there. And I don't really see what's wrong with that, especially in a place
Be
of
weird. Can I ask you
learning.
then? Can I
Yeah,
ask you then? Do you
please.
think that this is the same? These students are not being invited. They are there through state mandate. They are
Yes.
not having a choice of which teacher they get or which classroom they do. So do you think that this is still analogous by the person who is in authority asking the student, hey, right?
Mhm.
And this works both ways. If a student said,
I can lend this. Yeah.
If a teacher, I should say, if a teacher said, "Hey, I am not going to refer to you by any pronouns other than ones I want to," I think that we would all have problems with that, correct? Like everyone here would be like, "Ooh, that's kind of weird," right? But this is kind of the opposite. And they are demanding that the students say, "Hey, I don't want you to refer to me by anything except for these specific things."
Just
Yeah,
for
I
the
don't
record,
really
I
see the.
would give the
Okay,
teacher.
go ahead. I want to. I
Please.
want Be Weird to answer though, if he can.
Yeah, the analogy, you just continue it, is like a teacher is seeing other tree houses and is maybe part of one of these tree houses and understands this language. And it's like, this is real. Gender is a spectrum and this is one part of it. And these learners are going to have a better way moving about the world if they understand one of these, complex aspects of gender and gender discussion. If the parents are okay with it, and there's just a vocal minority who complain, then I don't see what the problem is. Yeah.
Can you repeat something you said? You said
Please.
those students are gonna have a better what exactly if they learn this?
They might have better, they might, I want to say like performance, like from the
Okay,
education
alright,
I'm taking,
gonna
like
ask you
they'll-
about
Better
that.
social cohesion within the
social
classroom.
cohesion. There you go. Yeah, yeah. They won't be numb, stunned, completely confused if they meet someone who's like, yeah, I'm pronounced Caesar, and they'll be like, what's this? Like, no, I learned that in class. No problem.
I don't think there's any merit to the idea that anything related to neopronouns will have a demonstrable effect on like
For
scores
sure.
and stuff. That's just there's just no data to even remotely suggest that.
At all.
Okay, sure.
I've got a pretty big issue that I think that exposing children to neopronouns, especially as an authority figure, would do, which is one, it's going to establish this idea that language between people comes down to the comfort of the person being spoken on, the idea that you as a subject are owed a certain level of language. There is a line of reasonability that we can cross, I think, and we need to be able to teach that to kids. While he and she, as the primaries, even when we're talking about transgender and we're talking about this, the whole point is that in the act of taking on a gendered pronoun, people have sort of conceded to the fact that humans see people in one of these two pretty predominant social categories of men and women. And whether or not you were born into that category or you try and conform to that category, they are basically saying, hey, I prefer to be referred in this way because this is going to set up the social expectations of how you engage with me more accurately than the opposite.
Tuna.
That's the function of the gendered
I
pronoun.
understand. Tuna, a question for you then. Do you not think that people are owed any kind of respectability in language? You act as if that's a kind of a foreign concept, but I think that most of us would agree that, I think everyone should be owed a degree of respect in how we communicate.
You having fun
I
so far,
agree,
chat?
but
Am I
my
doing good?
level of respect is
Follow, like.
is a little bit different. So the main thing for
Tweet.
me is that
Root.
language serves a purpose. Language needs to be
I
functional
don't know
for
if this
both the
tuna guy is
speaker
so good.
as the subject and the spoken, the object. So when I'm speaking
shot, did that
about
work?
you, Wick,
Thank you
I
so much
need
for
to
the follow,
speak in a
Crispy
way that
Ivy.
both one holds a respect for your identity and also has a respect for my expression and my
Thank you, Barely.
ideas. If I don't have that
Thanks for
freedom,
helping me develop
if
it.
we
You notice I
don't
cited you?
find that common ground between the two of us, which I think neopronouns have a certain animosity that gets brewed much more often than the gender pronoun. If we're not able to figure out that commonality, what happens is that the sentence
crazy
is
debate.
more for you
Should
or more for me.
neopronouns be
If it's more
enforced
for
by a
me when
teacher
I'm
in school?
speaking to you, if I'm the reason that mutuality is not
Okay, I
being
get you.
But
then I'm dominating.
where does that animosity derive from? It derives from confusion that people are unwilling to lend a little bit of credence to the idea that someone is using language that differs from what their social norms.
No,
This
it
exists
doesn't.
across all cultures.
It doesn't. That's the
Responding
problem.
to that
I am a
with
sociologist. I can speak on this. This happens across all cultures. There's
Your
different ways of
authority means
referring
Just
to
real,
people.
really
man.
quick,
Yeah.
Gremloe, can you elaborate on that for those of us who are not sociologists? Can
Sure.
you kind of
Just don't-
elaborate on that just briefly?
Sure, there are sentence
that's the
modifiers that people
conversation.
use throughout many different cultures that
These are
depend on
kids.
the honorifics that you will use whenever you're talking to someone, or what region of a country that you're from, whether you're from like the northern region where you'll use a different connotation, or whether you're from the south region. This exists across all things. I'm hearing a lot about like the harm done or potential harm of introducing neopronouns into a classroom. Reality is, you change one word
What's the
that
harm?
you're using, and you likely will never use it a lot if we're being real. Because like mix is not that much of a change, and is not really going to be something that you're going to be using a lot as a student anyway. Ultimately, you're going to be with this teacher for what, 6 months out of the year, 8 months out of the year, and then they move on to another one. It's like we're proposing that this is going to shatter their entire idea of themselves, or like even tread upon like this is like indoctrinating them into some kind of like gender ideology. The idea that this is
Gremloe's good.
teaching them an ideology is
This is
ridiculous.
That's not what people
This
on
is-
this side are claiming.
This is
I've
something
heard-
where
well,
you
maybe not.
have to think about the line of respectability, right? We just established that this intersubjectivity, this mutual respect, to me, I've established for myself that that's the primary importance is mutual respect, not just respect for one
True.
or the other's comfort. And it's also not, to what Tuna Chip was saying, it's also not just people's ideologies or how people express themselves. It's almost a skill issue. It's like respecting the ability of people to use or not use words that they've literally never heard before you come along as a neopronoun user. And there
think
is a neopronoun, a form of a neopronoun. It's called they, them, and it's been used and it has beaten out since the 1800s at least. There have been neopronouns that have been, and neutral pronouns that have been proposed, and none of them have caught on. Thon, the one, didn't catch on in the 20s. They, them has caught on and usurped itself as the neutral pronoun in English, and people have gotten to a point that people have been practicing this and they know that that's a neutral pronoun, but it already also existed as a word. So it's a mutual respect of the skill and ability of people to learn completely new words and to remember to only refer to you as those words. It's a patience
Would
thing,
this
but
matter?
it's also
Like, would this
mutual
matter
respect.
if it was an older age group? So, is your only problem, Johnny, Tuna, and GSU, the fact that it's young kids? Would this change
No.
for you if this was
wouldn't.
in high school, for example? Would this
This
change at
wouldn't
all?
change. It wouldn't change for me at all. And I want to call out like this sleight of hand that Gremloe did. You injected that this is confusion, and then you mentioned that, hey, I'm a sociologist trying to like bolster your claim. The fact that you studied sociology definitely doesn't give like it doesn't give credence to the idea that this is somewhat confusion. People absolutely understand what's happening. They
The
just
point he made was
disagree that there's-
sociological. The point he made was sociological and about society and language.
Sure, but
so it
his
totally makes
authority-
sense.
Hey,
Yeah.
him placing himself as an authority has nothing to
No.
do with the question. Of course, it was sociological, but just
If
because
he wants to do it, he can do it. I mean,
it's a
No,
field.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that he can't do it. I just want to make
Okay.
sure people are aware of what's happening, right? I can say nonsense and then say, "Hey, I'm a software engineer," and that doesn't mean that the technical claim that I made before that actually makes sense. So I'm just calling out that just because you boast yourself as a sociologist and you call this confusion doesn't actually make it confusion when most people can pretty clearly see on the face that it's not confusion. It's a disagreement of values.
The reason I brought up confusion is because I am having trouble understanding what the harm done by the usage of neopronouns in the classroom setting or in any setting that is being asked by a person in a position of
Wick is
authority
very sharp.
is, and I'm not
what you-
hearing harm done.
So
You
what you
want a
just said is,
clarification?
hold on, no. What you just said is you're having confusion understanding us, so you marked our opinion as confusion, right?
Can you
Like,
answer
No,
his
I
question?
said
Really
I'm not
quick,
hearing a
Can you
harm
answer
done.
his question? Because that is a good point.
Yes.
What, for those of you on that side, what is the harm done? Say this
We-
goes through.
We've expressed
What?
this multiple times, and I can do it again. We've
Please
said
do.
that
Please
this.
be
You
No,
described it
you-
as a line
You've
being
given
crossed.
me potentialities. You
Yeah.
haven't
No,
given me
no.
harm done.
So listen, we'll say it again for you. We think that using ridiculous language degrades conversation, degrades society, puts us on a path to embracing like just absolute nonsense.
That is an
That's like-
unfalsifiable claim.
No. It degrading conversation and how people feel about that. Degradation is subjective. So when people claim that they feel this degrades communication overall in general, it also doesn't map onto anything that you're producing yourself, like the other gender pronouns that we all understand. So it's not bringing any value. It's degrading conversation. It doesn't help anyone involved except the person that wants to be selfish. So there isn't any value in it, and we can all see that.
All I'm hearing is that you are confused by
I'm
neopronouns,
not confused.
and you don't want to go through the 2 seconds it takes to go, oh, what was it again? Oh, it's this? Okay, well, I'll try and commit that to memory.
Gremloe's
You're
so
saying
aggressive.
it's going to, bring about chaos. It's going to bring about confusion. It's going to bring about discourse.
No,
All it
he didn't
is
say that shit.
supplementing
I didn't say that.
language. We are now learning that there are other ways people want to be referred to themselves, and we
Yeah.
can expand upon that. This is what happens in
think-
linguistics. Language
I
changes.
think
I
I
want to
think
give
in
I
your
want to give both you and
clubhouse-
Shuna a chance to respond. So first of all, are you
Yeah.
done, Gremloe? So they can
Yeah,
respond.
go ahead.
Okay.
yeah,
So
I think if
go
you're
ahead.
in your clubhouse, in the analogy that Be Weird made, and you want to set some linguistic boundaries in your clubhouse, you can feel free to. But when it comes to interacting with people outside of your clubhouse, that doesn't mean they're going to participate in the language that you use in your clubhouse.
Yeah,
And
I would
if
love to
you're
respond
forcing
to
people
this.
That-
to move into the clubhouse, like that's a whole
Yeah.
other.
I would love to respond to this.
Luca wanted in, and then
Um,
Be Weird, and then Tuna still has to respond. So go ahead.
So, Gremloe, I do think that it was a little bit uncharitable the way that you interpreted what GSU said. I think what they said was wrong, but I also think that it just wasn't exactly what you were saying. I think the main contention I have with it is that the idea that the English language is some sacred thing, and that the way that we have conversations and interact with each other can't be subject to like some amount of change over time is kind of
Yeah.
goofy.
Yeah, ice
Like,
beans.
just because maybe
come
the
and show us
conversations
how to
are
do it?
more centered around whether or not the language is polite for you as a person, I don't think that means that that's a necessarily bad thing. I also, JohnnyScarlett, earlier you had said, hold on, I had it written down somewhere. No, it wasn't you. Shit, I guess I lost it. Sorry,
But,
y'all. I guess that's all I got.
Well,
Be
can
Weird.
you explain that last part a little bit more?
Fair enough.
sounds
Yeah,
like you-
answer his question.
What
Yeah.
question?
It sounds like you said you felt like I only thought like explain that last part, because what I'm saying is important. It's like almost the same thing you said earlier. It isn't just respect for this one person that's attempting to be selfish. It's a mutual respect amongst both of those people, which is what I said. I didn't say exactly what you said, but go ahead.
So how do you see that as being so terribly removed from like names or nicknames?
I think we have certain social expectations of using names. We have certain social expectations of using pronouns. I think you having a unique name in any way is all par for the course. But you attempting to elicit your own pronouns is not par for the course and is not a part of standard interactions. Do you see
Think
how
that-
those things are different? Having a unique name versus having a unique set of pronouns?
Yes, but I would argue that pronouns, especially neopronouns, and nicknames have a lot of overlap. I also think that the way that these social interactions change over
Wait,
time is
wait,
fine and natural.
Wait, let's take this step by step. You said you think that nicknames and neopronouns operate the same, but when we use our sentence structure and we're going to choose to use a pronoun, we're attempting to place that with a neopronoun, and we're attempting to place that with what you're now saying is a nickname. Do you understand that this is a categorical change in how
If
we
this
use
turns
language?
into a grammar debate,
No.
I am going to be mad.
Well, I'm just saying that that
Hey,
analogy
well,
is incorrect.
I started with a
Neopronouns are
note.
not being used as neopronouns are not being used as nicknames. If they were, they would be an adjective describing. These are being
Still
used
going with
directly
no
as
for this
pronouns.
because it's
They're
not what I said.
referential to the person.
Luca,
thank-
you can rephrase if you'd like, but I want to move off the grammar thing. I don't
Yeah,
think the
cool.
grammar thing's important to this. But
I'd love to address an earlier point that was raised about like how what's the line being crossed. It's pretty clear. It's decided by the parents of the kids. That's the power structure in play. And although we see it from the outside looking in through a TikTok and a couple minutes of it, it's clear by the fact that it exists that nothing's broken. Everyone's doing okay.
how does that follow exactly?
The point, well, everybody's worried about like the harm being done, but if parents are okay with the professional that is educating their kids in the way that professionals educating them,
What if they
overseen by,
weren't okay with it?
then they would
What if
be
the
taking
kids
their.
aren't okay with it?
If the kids aren't okay with
Fuck
it,
'em.
then they'd be able to talk to
And
the
can the
teacher,
kids
talk to the
bring it up?
administration. Pardon?
In this power dynamic, would the kids even feel comfortable expressing that they don't really feel like learning
Mhm.
to use this entirely new type of grammar?
In education, we call the teacher loco parentis. It is the person who is the parent in charge. They are given that authority, and parents are extremely careful about who they entrust with that authority. And I don't think that
No,
parents are going to.
Are they?
Generally,
Yes,
they
the
try
schools
their
are-
best. It is a strong effort, and I mean, come on, where are we going to live is often decided
know-
by where's a good place to raise our kids. And I don't.
So
I
you
understand
think
that's a
that people
privileged
should-
argument.
Let him finish. Let him be weird. You can finish, and then
Really quick.
I'll let Tuna address, and then she asks you.
I understand this is like an argument of privilege, but simply put, like, teachers are professionals, and parents generally trust them. If they have a problem with that, they take their kid out of the school, they address the administration, etc. That's how you address harm in school, and it doesn't always work, but that's the system we have.
Tuna,
I can
you're up.
responding to
I'm listening.
Gremloe before we get too far away from
Go for it.
Gremloe's statement. So I've got a couple of things that I think that whether or not it's the enforcement or just the encouragement of neopronouns from the authority figure inside of the school is an issue. Number one, it's that there's an environment where authority is supplanting
I
the
can't
value
find it.
of the speaker. When the child is speaking,
I'll look around for it.
they need to speak with reverence towards the authority. I think that that's a bad value to teach children because it is a non-critical value. It also sort of teaches them this idea that when people are speaking, that somebody else outside of the brain, the authority that is ever present in the room is more important towards the structure of the sentence. I just don't think that that's true. I think that number one is the individual and getting their point expressed, and then number two is the comfort of everybody, if it is possible without suppressing the expression. Number two, the embodiment of values. When you speak words, and when you're made to speak words for the teacher, that teacher is using your body for their comfort. And if you are inside of their classroom and they're saying, when you speak of me, you must call me sir, you must call me ma'am. These things I find just as repugnant, but the neopronoun is another sort of honorific that is unlike the honorifics that you were referring to, in that this is one, just like you said, doesn't actually hold utility outside of that context. So the mutuality that could have been there, which is you need to be ready to use this honorific in day-to-day because people expect it inside of situations of authority. You're not actually teaching that person something like that. You're teaching them how to do this one-off, very often a pronoun that doesn't actually have a strong meaning. It's not you are the man or woman who has authority over me, so I honor that authority by saying sir or ma'am. It is instead, you are a person I am speaking to. So because it doesn't have a social value, I think that it doesn't have a value to the person that is being
What do we
taught.
think about that? Does it not have a social value? What are our thoughts there?
To those who use neopronouns, they do.
The idea.
No,
I disagree with the idea that it's like, sorry, who were you gonna let go?
No, you can go. You just took the reins. It's all good.
Cool. Okay, so I disagree that it's something
mod
that
slipping. Mod check.
I'd actually,
Mod check.
now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of do agree, Tuna, that it's this thing that takes away the meaning associated. Like if you're referring to a person as them as opposed to she, her, you're still referring to a person. You're still using a word that is recognized in the English language as being referred to a person. One thing that I did want to get back to, though, is that Gremloe asked a really good question, and we didn't really answer it. Like, what is the harm here? And one thing that really kind of pushed me over the edge to want to talk about this particular situation and to expand it into other power dynamics is that this is a Spanish teacher. And this person is already teaching children something that is difficult for people to learn, even into middle school and high school. It's difficult to learn a new language. It's kind of ironic that we're talking about something that fundamentally changes the English language and teaching them a new form of English that not everybody agrees with, while the teacher is also
I got a good
trying
one.
to teach them something else that's already difficult to learn. I think personally that it's a distraction in the classroom. And if we were to expand this to other power dynamics,
Can
like
you
if
rate
work
this
at
on a
store,
scale for me, like of harm done? On harm done, 1 being slight mild temporary discomfort, 10 being like, I don't know, genocide, right? Where does this fall?
I think it's more than mild temporary discomfort because it's an active
Well, 2, 3. I
distraction
don't
over the
need like
course.
yeah, just
Oh,
2,
okay.
3, 4,
Okay,
5.
okay.
What do you think?
I'm thinking like a 3 or
Damn.
4. Yeah,
This-
I'm
this
thinking
kinda
at least
rough.
a 3 or 4.
Wow.
And just to expand it to another power dynamic, if this was a bunch of adults who their manager is putting up Caesar posters in the back room to remind everyone to refer to
Stick
the
figure?
manager that way, like
Weird.
it's still a weird power dynamic to me, even when there aren't kids involved to essentially enforce this entirely new type of language on these people.
What do you think about
It's
that?
a distraction, though.
Who here has ever had to raise their hand in order to speak? Who here has ever had to learn a new social nicety or process in order to do a thing? I found Tuna's point about a teacher like controlling the human child for their own pleasure to be so absurd, because we all learn at a young age. We gotta like raise our hand just to speak because we haven't
I would
even
like
learned.
to address Tuna's point on that, but go ahead, B-Word, because I didn't get a chance to address. I would like to go back to it in
Sure,
a second.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Gremloe,
think you
then,
know where
I
I'm.
see you. I see you, Luca. Don't worry. We'll get to you. I promise.
Take your time.
Right?
We got plenty of
You're
time.
good.
Listen,
You're
we're
good.
here for
You're good.
2 hours. We're good.
Yeah, I think you know where my point's going. Just that, like, we have some vestigial social niceties, and it might just be that some learners get different types of them. They learn about xenogenders in one class because one teacher was really into it, and that's what we call enculturation. It's not something you can like put into. You'd have to do like some sort of like long study. But anyways, please, other people respond.
You said
Can I
indoctrination.
respond to it really quickly? That particular
Studies.
point? Okay. The difference here is
Enculturation.
that there's a ubiquity towards the rules that we're talking about. Raising your hand, calling someone sir or ma'am in public, these are things that have a very broad utility. So that means when you teach them to the child, there is an obvious social value that we know will be manifested
Would
later
you
in their
change
life.
your mind? Would you change your mind on this, Tuna, if adoption of these neopronouns became more ubiquitous? If instead of like it being a very minority of people who use it, instead it became like 20% of the population for whatever reason, right? Like they started using this. Would that change your mind?
Yeah, especially
Rick's
if the
good. Ask
neopronouns
good questions.
had a set and defined meaning in the way that, for instance, the honorifics in Japan were. I clearly think that it's based on
His
the
bar
language
is
and the culture
centuries
we're
of
raising the child
generation.
in.
Fair enough. Okay, Gremloe, I know you wanted to respond to some things, so I'm gonna give you some chance.
Yeah,
now.
Tuna, just to kind of what B-Word was addressing there, could you just kind of like circle back, just because we kind of like went around for a second. I don't really remember exactly how the statement went. Could you just kind of like give me a rehash of it?
Sure. So number one, authority supplants the value of the speaker. So when the speaker is speaking, they are not speaking from expression first. They are speaking with honor of the authority first. And I think that that is a misbalance of language. I think it stifles a child's learning of how to use language well. Number two, the embodiment of values is disrespected in that a person is not allowed to embody their values in the act of speaking. They have to embody the values of the authority, which is the authority using the child's body, because the authority is saying this thing without honor towards the child's autonomy.
Does that refresh your memory?
Those
Gremloe?
are the two main.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I can relate to like the
What?
sentiment of like kind of the anti-authoritarian structure, right? I
Sure.
get that, right?
Gremlin.
But I
than that.
can tell you, what's that?
More than that. So it's not that I'm anti-authoritarian in this. It's that I think that this is an unjustified authority because it is not. It's not teaching the child anything functional and useful. Keep going now.
God, are you an anarchist?
I'm a form of anarchist, absolutely.
What?
Oh,
Just
God.
ignore the anarchist stuff. Just,
Okay.
yeah, go. Let's go.
Okay,
That's
calm
another
down,
debate.
calm
That's
down.
another debate.
You're good. You're good. I get that sentiment, right? But I can tell you from an
Pegged.
educator's perspective that there are, at least in America, I don't know what the class sizes are like in Canada. I think you mentioned you're Canadian. Correct
I'm
me
not
if wrong.
Canadian. I'm
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood then.
Yeah, don't
can
you
tell
dare
you-
compare me to
Oh,
those
be
people.
weird. Okay, sorry. I'm
Yo.
confusing my my Canucks. So I can tell you that in America, like the class structure of like 30 kids, there are too many kids to consider the ideological grievances or like conservative grievances and resistances towards like neopronouns or non-binary pronouns, or even if this teacher is trans, to be concerned about that parent and that one kid. There are 29 other students in that classroom to be concerned about, right? I get the we're supplanting the authority structure in here, but ultimately that person is an authority figure. We can talk about the relationship dynamics and how far that goes and what type of class structure we have and the autonomy that teachers give. Teachers have different ways of doing it. But ultimately, that person is a qualified professional who has been put in a position of authority to be trusted by the students and parents and faculty to carry out a job. That one little thing is just a tiny ask that is not going to supplant social expectations of those children for the year. Maybe a couple of them will learn a few things about it, about like gender pronouns, but that's about it. No real harm done there.
It's a conditional authority, though. It's a conditional authority,
It is.
which is that is a job, and you have to fulfill your duties as a teacher. And I think that in all actions you do during the space between those two ringing bells, all of your actions need to be about fulfilling that duty. And I think that the neopronoun incidence is an incidence where you are not fulfilling the duty, you're actually going against the duty. And like you said, there are 29, 30 kids, let's say that. That also means that there are probably about, let's say, 40 to 60 parents involved, and that these people are authorities that are outside, and these authorities are the taxpayers. These authorities are the people that have their own values. What I'm saying is that the classroom should be made out of a mutuality of all of the authorities that are existent at the base. I'm in the same way that I'm against the neopronoun, I would say I would be against the conservative or liberal value being taught in some other kind of implicit and non-functional way in terms of the teaching environment.
I mean, I get that, but I'm a little more hardline against the conservative ones just personally. I don't think their opinions matter. I don't think we need to give them any credence. But
dehumanization was a real issue with you, right?
Oh, no, it's not a dehumanizing thing. I just don't think that the conservative values bring about any kind of positive ends or really, hold any water. So I don't think the minority opinion of people whose entire worldview is based on reactionary politics lends any credence towards a efficacious educational environment.
It's an interesting thought, because that would mean that the people that make it so that school is able to exist at all, the people whose money.
I'm just talking about pipe dream. If I had the controls of levers of power, and I was able to say, yeah, fuck it, I don't really give a shit about your opinion.
Yeah, the guillotine would fall. I get it.
Yeah, sure.
I got some
some
opinions too.
I want Luca to go, and then I know GSUGambit's been chomping at the bit here, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, we're kind of getting into the weeds of systemic issues that schools have between power dynamics with teachers. I don't really think that anyone can really say that neopronouns are going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back in this regard.
Tuna Chip wanted
I
him
think
to say
if
that.
we want to solve systemic problems in schools, things like staffing and resources are a good way to start, and then we can start to worry about how one tiny extra thing might devalue education. GSU, please take it away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'm
had
doing
wrote
it.
down a couple
I'm
of things.
getting
They
a
were
degree
while
in
ago now.
in
I
educational
think
technology. You
Weird
sell
kinda
courses
agrees
online.
that
It's the future.
most parents don't have multiple options for schools,
But
and
no,
even in those
because
schools that
school
they
is
do have
political,
options, it's
tied to a tax
typically
base.
not multiple options for different
Reflects
teachers of
society.
all of the subjects, right? So I think we can all agree on its face that it's kind of a bit ridiculous to say, well, if you don't like your kid using having to use neopronouns, that you can just pick up and leave. That's not a reality for almost the majority of the country. So hopefully you walk that back and you understand that.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
there's multiple other problems with this, and it goes kind of in line with what Tuna Chip is saying. Not only because these things are individual is a problem, but they're also innumerable. So in addition to you will have to do this exercise with everyone who participates in this ideology. and it'll be a different one. So, and I kind of like what Johnny was saying, but just slightly different, like twist on it. When somebody uses them to describe someone who is non-binary, they've learned a concept and they've been able to map that somewhat to the language that they're using, so that they've run into other people who are non-binary. They now have some sort of expectation. It goes along with what Tuna was saying earlier too. They have some expectation of what to say to that person, how to interact with that person, how that person might interact back to them. In this world of neo-pronouns, none of that exists, and it's all like ludicrous nonsense. That's the harm, that we're going to be teaching kids things that aren't applicable in any other environment except the interaction with that human being. So if
Same
they never see
question.
that human,
Yeah, same question I asked to Tuna Chip though. If neopronoun users become much more prevalent, would that change your mind? So instead of going from
it
a very
wouldn't. It wouldn't on the
wouldn't.
grounds of what I just said, because each person's neo-pronoun can be different. So you aren't learning anything transitive that can be applied in other scenarios outside of learn a new word, right? The only thing you're learning is to learn a new word.
So
You're
because
not
it's
actually.
individualized rather than there's a group that mass adopts it, that is your main issue here.
That's not my main issue. That's
Oh
one
well,
of
that's
all every.
that's one
Yeah.
of the issues
Yes.
here. Okay.
Yes.
Can I
That's
check
why-
And
with
that's why.
Seems like
and,
such
and,
a
and it's specifically
small fries. Who cares?
our education system is falling. If you talk to people like Gremloe, I guarantee you he'll say that. So because of that, I think adding a potentially unending amount of new things for kids to learn outside of things that are making our kids better for the long term for their lives, I think that's destructive. I think that's somewhat evil to enter kids into a place where they are
Bro,
learning things that
what?
aren't meant to help them for the rest of their lives.
Defenders
The
of
reason we-
evil. Defenders of
No,
evil.
Rise up.
When will they stop?
The reason
No,
hold on.
finish
The reason
your point.
the reason we've constructed our education system is to create a contract with kids where if you go to this institution, the idea is that if you
Stop,
perform
Mushi.
well, the outputs of your life thereafter will be better. And I think we're entering into a false contract if we create unending amounts of nonsense that they're learning that supplant their ability to actually
Okay.
learn things that matter.
Okay,
yes, that's evil,
I want to let the
for
other
sure.
side respond. I want to let Team Evil, which is now your side. I like that name.
I'm here
Team
for it.
Evil, go ahead.
As the most evil member of Team
Fuck
Evil.
you.
What?
I'm most evil.
I don't think it's a widespread harm. I notice how the Overton window keeps shifting in order to like make their argument make sense. It's got to keep ballooning to like a whole systemic issue. This started off as one teacher who is enculturating students into one way of
Concrete policy, which is systemic. It's immediately systemic when you say thou shalt call people their neo-pronoun. That becomes systemic at that point.
because
You-
it's in
you
a
do understand
school,
that,
a
right? Even if
single
it's-
school. It's just
Well,
generally
what's the
systemic.
school?
Hold on, wait. Is the argument for this?
That's a small
conversation what we
system.
should do
That's a
in that
very,
one
very.
class? No. Listen, are
Yeah.
you arguing what we should do in that one class, or are you arguing what we should generally do across society when we encounter people who use neo-pronouns in an academic setting? Which are you arguing?
I can go either way, man. If it's an academic
you're
setting
arguing for
and
the
people are
system.
saying,
Okay.
"Hey, this is
Okay,
how
so
I'd
you're-
like to be referred,"
so-
what's the difficulty there?
So
We're in a
have we
place of
gathered-
learning, my guy.
Hold on. Listen, no. I want to ask the moderator because it's unclear of why we've gathered here to talk. Or maybe I should ask Johnny because she came up with the topic. But
Oh, sure.
my thought process.
Sure.
I
is
think
that
the more
this
interesting
conversation-
the topic is we are taking it in instances where there are teachers with neo-pronouns, not just this teacher, not just this classroom,
So we're
but
talking
in
about the systemic.
instances where a school is using this as a rule. What should we do about it? What's the stance we
So
should
do
take?
you
Okay,
agree
thanks for
that we're
clarifying,
talking about the
GSU.
systemic view
Yes,
of
I
it?
agree that we're talking systemically.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Thanks for pushing back. Okay, so I guess the point still is that like when learners are coming to a place of learning and they're adapting their language, you can be thinking about it as learning a new man, there's so many grammatical things you sometimes have to learn. Some of them are extremely ancient, like honorifics in South Korean culture, and some of them are very new. Like they, them was a new thing when I was in my 20s and having to learn it with a friend of mine who was, transitioning.
They them is actually something that has been around for several generations. We have they them actually, as I said before, coming
Okay.
into common knowledge and usurping other proposed new words for the singular neutral.
Okay.
Sometimes
And
we
so
use it on accident to
this is
refer to
not
people who
something
aren't
that's new.
non-binary.
Okay.
I'll
It's kind of
also,
like a.
Absolutely.
just to put this in here also,
Please.
it's as a pronoun predated they them. So even the it's, it was a sort of thing that got let go of. I grew up where
Okay.
a lot of the trans people I knew used it.
Do we think this matters though? This time, like to me, and I guess I'll jump in here a little bit. Is I don't care how old something is or how new something is. It's the ancientness or the novelty of a thing does not matter to me. I don't know.
I'm not pointing to the oldness in particular. I am actually pointing to how many times
Okay.
admitted over a long period of time, how many times this has become a an issue where we need a singular neutral, and they them has always outperformed everything else because it is already a word.
It demands some word needs to be there. So there's a function that needs a word.
Evolutionary mimetics. Evolutionary mimetics. Like, is that what we're talking about here? Like the best meme that survives is the most moral and good.
Not that.
I mean,
it's not that nearly as much as it's
Darwin's
that,
meme.
Unlike well, this is an important difference between the neopronoun and they them, even though they're both, sort of culturally defiant by a very traditional value. The thing about they them is that a word needed to step up to the plate because the sentences demanded a word function there. Versus neopronouns, there's no necessity. It's not like people were having a big issue talking.
Why does it have to be a necessity? Tuna,
Yeah.
this is the
It's
part
so
where
weird.
I'm confused. Why does it
because
need to be
he's saying to be a part of our education system, it should be a necessity because that is
Should be a
teaching
necessity to
kids
use it or to
something
not
be
use it?
transitive.
As a
To,
poet,
to use it, it should be something that's transitive. Not
as a poet, can I read you a single bar? You might all recognize it. 'Twas brillig in the slithy toves, did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome rats out grave.
I don't recognize.
Jabberwocky.
Okay, as a person who has extensively studied the actual books that those poems are from, the entire point of what he was doing was to make up something that didn't make a lot of sense outside of that very specific context. Okay, that doesn't mean that should be universally adopted as words that mean things, though.
Okay, so we should stop teaching this across English language arts class as an example of how language can communicate despite being
I don't care about the poetry portion.
Oh, okay.
It's relevant.
I like poetry. I like poetry, right?
Cool.
The point is that the communicative utility was skewed. That is the entire point. And what our friends are pointing to on the supposed non-evil side, what GSU was pointing to, is that there is a utility within schools, and there is a utility within what we are required to teach children within schools. And so if a utility is not universal, or at least somewhat universal to multiple forms of humanity, like they them can be used for someone you don't know or for someone that you do know.
Learn to respect your teacher.
There is express utility in that.
Learn to respect your teacher.
I don't think that we have to have something be universally applicable in every single scenario for it to be something that we consider worth teaching to children. I learned how to do math as a kid, but I did not have to learn every single mathematical equation that ever existed. It is a concept, a building block on which we build a manner in which we respect other people. Because it doesn't have like the utility that some people want doesn't mean it's bad.
Can I ask you a question, Luca? I think learning, I think what we're arguing is the individuality of it is what makes this valueless in the concept of a school environment, right? If I were to say I wanted to sanction that you had to learn about your teacher's past, I think you'd say that that's a bit ridiculous. If you were tested or you were demanded to know the past of your teacher, knowing their neopronoun is as useless as having to learn their past or other individual characteristics about them, right? So the teacher's individuality is never what's paramount in the concept of an academic institution, right? And similarly, like we keep talking about the teacher, but there's also complexity if we were to allow this to be mandated if the students wanted it, because that's still authority there, right? Like we can all gain authority whether or not we're the ultimate authoritative figure in the situation, right? So it's that aspect of it. You,
Okay.
you are asking me to learn how many times has my teacher been married mandatorily as a part of participation in our academic institution. It's that
What's your
valueless,
question?
and that's the part that we have a problem with.
What's your question?
I'm just calling out. No, you specifically said
You did
that.
say you had a question for him, but
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm asking, do you understand what we're really arguing about is the individuality of this and not whatever you said. You said that it's not
mean-
ultimately useful. You said that things aren't universally like a universal tactic, and I'm arguing that it's not that aspect of it that we have a problem with. It's the individuality aspect that we have a problem with, not whether or not something can be broadly applied to multiple contexts, like the math equations you brought up.
do I understand that that's the point that you're trying to make? Yes,
You
but
you specifically
Chip,
said we were
you
trying to
got
make
you
the
got to let
opposite
him to
point.
respond to you though. You got to let him respond to
Please.
you. So go ahead,
I'm try-
Luca, please.
Chip definitely referenced that as a specific core tenet of one of his disagreements with the very idea of neopronouns, that they're not, they don't have that kind of function, that they are useless in the specific manner in which I was describing them. They're not a universally applicable thing. And you also yourself, GSU, mentioned that this is an innumerable problem, that there are innumerable potential neopronouns, which I think is also a little goofy because there's also an innumerable number of names. And I think it'd be a little weird for us to insist that names don't have any kind of value, or that just because there's a lot of names in the world that we are bogging down kids in this ever-growing list of confusing and bewildering things.
I'd like to make a clarification really quick because it's important. I don't think that things need to be universally valuable. Obviously, it's silly. What I'm saying is that we know that when we teach children, for instance, a gendered pronoun, that we know for a fact that is going to be useful in the future because it's unavoidable that they're going to have to learn that. Unlike these pronouns, which don't. And then the other part is that it is not mutually valuable. In that the person who is saying it, speaking it, and being asked to speak it, the child, is not able to really understand the meaning behind the neopronoun, because when it comes down to it, these neopronouns don't have a social. Huh?
What? Really?
Is that true?
That's
Is that true
I-
that kids can't understand the utility of neopronouns?
No, it's not the utility, the meaning. So, okay.
Sure.
the
Is
thing-
that
the
true,
thing with
Steven?
he and
The
she,
meaning?
Referring to
the thing
them.
with he and she is that they are based inside of a very abundant and clear category of social roles.
Is
When I
that
say like
clear?
Z and
Yes,
Zer,
yes,
what?
Is that clear though? Right?
it is.
I
very.
don't. You think that is clear? Okay, fair enough.
It's
I think if you
extremely
asked the
clear
kid
that
to identify the pronouns and you threw out random people, most likely they'd be able to in most cases. I think if
people
you threw out
The-
a random group of
know.
people and said which of these is Zer, they wouldn't know it. They wouldn't have a clue.
You wouldn't know which one's he, him either.
You don't need to know whether or not somebody is he, him. That's not the point. It's that when we know that there are men, we know that there are women, and we know what the social categories as sort of like master signifiers mean. We have associations that are clustered around them. Unlike Zer, or like Fey, self, or any of these ones that go really, really down the line, these things have a non-substantive quality in our culture. They don't have a category that the children innately understand, because children are being raised around people that are exhibiting the masculine and feminine social role. We know that they're going to be able to navigate the world using that.
Speaking of
We know-
navigating the
we
world,
also
just really
know
quick.
that-
Speaking of navigating the world, if I get one more donor in the next minute, we get a hype train, gang. So
Let's go.
we all want
Donate!
that. Anyway, go ahead, Johnny. Just
You-
needed to show.
Okay, yeah, and there's also utility in the they them, whether you know that this person is non-binary or where you have no idea what this person is because people like that exist, you know? And to further that, there is a certain amount of how do I put this? It's important to remember that we are not talking about words that have a meaning. Z and zer are not definable words. They are literally made up to be neutral pronouns.
All words
Therefore,
are made
their
up.
utility has
All
already
words are
their
made up,
utility has already been established in another word. But even in the they them, as a they them myself, I said this 3 different times on stream today. I'm never gonna have my landlord have the conversation with me about what pronouns I use. I'm never gonna have the guy at the corner store call me they them, because in those particular situations, even my pronoun has no utility. And if they choose in modern language to use the they them pronoun, if they just don't know, I think that that has expressed utility as well, and it's been established.
Sometimes it
Yeah,
happens
and
that. May I?
yeah,
Sometimes,
go.
yeah.
Be weird. Go ahead.
Sometimes
Floor
it
is yours.
happens that we meet somebody and we don't get to use the correct pronoun. Like, for instance, the difference between Mrs. and Ms. It's a subtle distinction, and you actually kind of have to know somebody in order to tell the difference. And it does have societal impacts, part of all of our speech and yada, yada, yada. And I think that as we grow as learners, we pick up all sorts of stuff, and not all of it is useful because we go in different paths. And I hate to break it to you, but education's still in the alchemy stages. We still are coming out of a century-long sleep, torpor, an industrialized model that doesn't really conform to the needs of learners. This idea that we can pump kids through and create these producers is long since dead. And so that's why I see a lot of this as learners are going to pick up all sorts of things, and neopronouns are clearly becoming at least something, maybe on the fringes. Maybe some of these learners will learn about it and they'll pick it up and drop it off. But it's a low ask. It's not that big a deal.
If a neopronoun is nothing more than a name, why do people need 2 names?
If a
Why
neopronoun
indeed?
is
Why do people need 2 names? Why do they need more names?
How many names do you have,
Culture.
Tuna? I have at least 4.
I have
But
3.
you don't want to
right?
replace parts of speech with your name. That's different. You might have
Yo,
3
we're
names.
wicking out. We're using my name as a brand. Look,
Let's go.
that's not true. I replace a
Would
lot of
you-
things in my community with my name. We're wicking out. Let's get our wick on, gang. Right?
Yeah.
Like this is how language evolves. Right?
You're talking
Sure,
about
but that's the thing.
private
Each one of
speech,
those,
right?
each one of those uses has
GSU had a really good
defining
point.
use. So you have your individual name, your first name. That's going to be to individuate you from your family. Then you have your family name. That's to connect you towards your bloodline. Then you have your brand name, right, which is able to create this sort of like persona under which you subsume yourself. But the neopronoun, especially when the neopronoun is able to be used by anybody, but doesn't have a set definition other than person
Family.
who is referred to as X, unless it has a functional meaning for the other person, why should they refer to you as that? When you have all of these
It's
other names that might be
masturbatory.
more
That's
useful.
what it is. That's what we call masturbatory. When something is meant for when something is meant for your own pleasure and it's not meant for the pleasure of others, you're basically masturbating.
Do
And I
you
don't think
use pronouns to masturbate?
I've been
No.
masturbating pronouns my entire life.
Anyway, I want to give Team
when
Evil. I
you
want to
use
give Team Evil a
neopronouns,
chance.
you're
I want to
masturbating.
give Team Evil a chance.
GSU's got a
Team. I don't know what to call you guys yet, but we'll figure it out. But Team
Team
Evil,
Dry Jack.
Team Dry Jack. Okay, Team Dry Jack has gotten a lot of floor time here, and Team Evil needs a little bit of floor time as well. So go
I
ahead, Team
love
Evil.
dry jacking. Keep going.
Yeah.
They've
Calluses.
talked more, they've just not made as many points. So it seems like we've talked more.
You're right. You're right. I mean, we still haven't established harm, but I mean, I don't know.
We have established harm.
You just haven't
No, you
on.
have established fear. You have established fear
No.
of a
Established
potential
distraction
harm.
in the
Fucking
classroom
mini.
as a
You-
harm.
you-
That was never
You
addressed.
all have to let Gremloe have space to finish his point, and then you can all yell at him, and that's fine.
It is such an easy ask, and to say that, again, going back to the children in these classes either don't know what it means, or like it's going to be a little confusing because they're gonna have to learn like a whole new thing that doesn't have a meaning. The meaning is that person. That's the meaning. If you're looking for what does Zhe, Zhe, Zay, Zem, Fei. What does that mean? It means that person. Does it have a specific, definition? No. But does it need to? No. It's that teacher. It is a very simple ask. And the resistance to this belies a very, very reactionary sentiment that I'm getting from some of them, not necessarily Johnny, but what I'm getting from, different type of anarchist and, GSU, is that you are afraid of change if it does not meet your specific criteria.
Okay.
Look,
So you keep saying that it's an easy ask and easy to implement.
Very easy.
And yes, the words that you're using are easy, but that doesn't mean that the
Oh, I see. Somebody's
the
in a
remapping or the impossible mapping that you're asking people to do is easy.
subscriber in
So
the
yes,
chat.
it's easy to
Why are
say
you
There
the
it is.
sentences that you're
it
saying.
is. Come
That
on.
doesn't mean that no, not at all. That's why we're having an entire conversation about it.
No, we're having the
Doesn't
conversation
stream?
because there are those who are resistant to change because it doesn't fit within their predetermined biases that they've accumulated over time.
No.
All it is that
I think-
you said you're a software engineer. STEM lords have a lot of trouble with nuance and change. So it's not an inherent thing, but it is within STEM. These
So you
issues
think the
are very difficult to.
occupation okay,
Go ahead.
GSU.
this is hilarious.
GSU. Let's be like really honest about this. We've had some gripes about neopronouns, and so far the ones that have really made any amount of sense have been that they're either cringe, that they don't have enough utility or set definitions for you to feel good, and they might cause some amount of non-verifiable,
Oh, damn.
non-objectively verifiable or quantifiable
Yeah,
harm.
it's good to see you, Ice Beans.
We haven't actually
you
demonstrated
were gonna
anything
try
actually
streaming.
substantive.
And
We've
Yes, we
just
are.
kind of we've
just
pawed at
disagree.
we've pawed at the idea that this could be bad because you don't necessarily see it as an overt good.
No.
Okay,
Do you think
I've
that it would be
established
used?
several times that I think that the distraction in the classroom is a verifiable harm,
What
but
distraction
also
now?
the distraction from what you're actually supposed to be teaching and from the language that is generally actually used to
Johnny.
refer to humans.
I mean,
Johnny,
Much-
I'm just
There
curious.
is
who
so
here-
much that happens in the classroom,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about like
Who here has been in the class?
pre-high school, where kids are going to, ask things about their teacher. They're going to ask ridiculous questions that are irrelevant. There's going to be a stun locks in the classroom. Everyone has been that one kid that asked the teacher about their weekend on a
fun.
Monday, so you didn't have to turn in homework and they forgot to ask for it. These things are going to happen. It is not removing the value of education or what is in the curricula. It is one step, one thing you do on day one.
I think
I
we're
ap-
really underselling the intelligence of children also. Like, kids do get distracted a lot. Kids are generally not that smart. But to say that they'd be any more distracted by a neopronoun than they would a ladybug on the window, or that they have an especially large amount of difficulty understanding these concepts, I think it's just
I'll
kind
call
of
you
asinine.
Mushy.
I don't know
The
how old all of
ladybug
you
on the
are,
window is
but
not something that the kids are actually having to physically do and work out in their head to change their grammar every single time they speak to this one individual person.
Is there no
And
value in
this
that?
is something where I am having a hard time myself. I use they them pronouns almost exclusively, and I have a really hard time adjusting to theirs. Like, I'm appreciating that that's going to be just as distracting for children who are sitting there trying to learn Spanish.
What is the value of the college essay? Why did we write all of these essays? What skills were we learning? Sometimes when we're trying to develop parts of our brain, parts of our thinking, parts of our perspective of the world, we have to do things that are circuitous, that don't necessarily map onto the real world. Why are we learning this, miss? Is a refrain you often hear from kids.
I
Now,
ain't never used a
You
parabola.
you know that this is a
Wait.
fucking. You know this is
Wait,
an
wait,
empty
wait.
argument. When you
Do
do
you
an
think-
essay, you're learning how to structure
No,
thought and communicate.
Let him answer
You
that.
ma-
Do you
I'm-
think the value in learning how to write an essay is the same value you would get out of learning to speak somebody's neopronouns?
Well, I'm trying to respond to your point directly, GSU, because you're kind of drilling down onto like language structure, and it's a linguistic argument, and I'm trying to come at you from that perspective. And yeah, like if you have young learners who are learning new methods to adapt language structures,
You're gonna
He's
make.
laughing, but I'm
gonna tell you
confused.
right
I'm
now,
confused because I thought we lived in a world where language is both old and new, and some people make up new stuff, and
That's
our
the
brains
thing,
have
though.
to adapt
We
to it
also
in
live in
real
a
time.
we
You
live in a
laughing,
world
but you
where
ain't
language
talking.
is
You laughing, but
utilitarian.
you ain't
I
talking.
can't.
So
Hey,
I'm
one at a time.
speechless.
Be
Hey,
weird.
stop, everyone. Stop. I understand. Tuna has something to actually say instead of just laughing or taunting. So, Tuna, briefly, please.
We live in a world where language is utilitarian, where people are using language for meaningful purpose. It's not just art. It's not just random spitwall. The essay builds a function. How can I take thought, formulate it in such a way that I can invoke the same beliefs in another person? Argumentative essay. In the instance of mathematics that got brought up before, math teaches us the physical laws of the world we live in, and thus allows us to have a better grasp of logic. It gives us a little bit more of a lean towards objectivity when we're thinking. When we're talking about the neopronoun, the closest thing to a lesson that you're learning, the two main lessons is one, the level of control somebody has over another person's speech has to do with is like politically determined. That's one thing that is pretty bad. Is that it's like either, oh, they're an authority, they're a power person, or they're an identity that needs to be respected. And then number two, it teaches the idea that if you speak something and make a demand of another person, it doesn't matter whether or not it's useful to them. And I think that that's a narcissistic lesson to teach.
Tuna, what about courtesy? Does it not teach courtesy? Does it not teach people to ask, like, hey, what would you like to be referred to as? And they can say, hey, I want to be referred to as whatever, right? Is that not, you may not think that lesson has a lot of value, but you can acknowledge at least that that is something that might be taught by the use of these kinds of things. Is that not correct?
I disagree, at least in the way that this is being taught in the example that we're using. I can
But
imagine.
we're not talking about this specific example
Okay,
only.
yeah,
We have
I
already went through with GSU and Be Weird that this is extending past this one specific example, and we're
Yes.
talking about this on more of systemic level. We've already established that, correct?
I want to whittle out what I think would be an example, like what it would have to look like for it to do that and not be diminutive. So what I'm going to say is the way that it would look if you were doing that would be where you create an open invitation to talk about pronouns, an open invitation to talk about internal experience, but not one where the teacher is putting it there and has this big token that is a reminder. There's somewhere in the middle that is the crossing line. I think the main one would be maybe name tags and having a day where everybody goes about it.
I'm curious if GSU agrees with that, though.
I agree with what he's saying, but I think more specifically, too.
Wait, so you would be okay with them, just to be clear, you would be okay with them if they just had an open discussion on neopronouns in the classroom?
Obviously.
Okay,
No,
so you're not on the same page then.
I don't think he's saying that we should suggest that we waste
vicious.
teaching time to have this open invitation. I think he's saying if that invitation probably was likely somewhere outside of the context of like learning in class, that could exist, and that's what I would more agree with. That's what
is that what you're saying, Tuna Chip? I want to be clear. You're here. I could just ask you.
It would depend entirely on what the class is. I think that inside of an English class or a class about language, it'd be very useful to talk about personal identity because it's a novel change, and that would be relevant. In a math class, in a Spanish class, it's not really that relevant.
How much time do you think they're spending in a math class on it, though?
Who knows?
What do you mean? No, it's not about that. It's ever present inside of the classroom because there is a standard of change for every sentence.
Man,
right. But how much time do you think they're honestly spending on the neopronoun conversation, other than if someone slips up and says like "miss"?
It's not about the amount of time that they're spending.
Calm down, buddy. Take a deep breath.
There is the specter of power present at all times inside of the minds of these children as they are creating their sentences.
Is the specter haunting the classroom?
Yeah.
Is it in the room with you right now?
But Wick, I want to answer your question too, because you said, wouldn't this be teaching respect and deference and those things?
Courtesy.
I think it's teaching the exact opposite, because this is a selfish institution. So when you learn courtesy, it's when you're learning something that's typically at least mutually valuable or mutually available, and then those concepts can like proliferate into things into the future. When you're learning something that's selfish, you aren't actually learning. You actually learn the opposite. You're learning disrespect. I'm learning that, and it's like what Tuna is saying. I'm learning that I can put like labor on you for my pleasure, and that's what you're actually learning in that exchange. You're not learning courtesy at
Okay.
all.
I don't. I am the moderator here. I don't want to jump in too much. I disagree, and that's all I'll
It's
say
cool.
on that. I'll let the team evil deal with it.
We
if
were
they
all
want.
agreeing that there's this handshake analogy, and it didn't seem like that big of an ask. And the reason I used
I
that
did not
We didn't
agree with the
agree with
handshake
that.
analogy.
Nobody agreed
Really?
on our side.
Nobody
If
agreed
every
with
teacher
that.
had a
Oh,
personal-
okay. I'm sorry. I'm
No.
sorry.
no,
Okay,
wait, yeah.
Hold on, wait.
because
Would you
my
agree
understanding
if-
here. Okay, go ahead.
Would you agree that a teacher should be able to create a handshake that the students must learn with them? A
Have you
different
not
handshake?
seen extremely popular TikToks of
No.
of
Wait. That's not what I'm
teachers
asking you.
at-
I'm not asking you, does it happen? I'm not asking you, do
Oh,
some people
okay.
participate in it?
Sure.
I'm asking you, would you be okay with a systemic change that said that teachers could force students to learn an individualized handshake in order to participate in that class? Would you be okay with that?
If there was something to do with anything that was related to identity or culture, or if there's some positive value that was being brought to the table, which there clearly is with neogenders, then yeah, education is a place of learning. New things happen.
Hello,
It's a
everybody.
place of learning
My name is Professor Tunachip. At the beginning of all classes, we need to start it by saying, "Hail Satan, death to the West." I would
Fucking
like to also
based.
we need to do a handshake where we put our hand
yeah.
inside our
Truck
lip
yeah, brother.
and we put it up to someone's nose.
Truck
Like,
yeah,
come
brother.
on. Fine.
They'll bite the bullets. The hard part about this conversation is, even if it's nonsensical, they'll say yes, right? So
No,
at that
there's a
point, I don't know if
caveat. There's a
having a conversation-
giant caveat there that like justifies it, which is like, yeah, if the people who have power in case, which is why I drew that line at the beginning, the parents involved to oversee the kids and their learning.
But
and
you
who have
agree that didn't make sense,
access.
the next sentence. You said those
Well,
parents don't
let Be Weird
really
finish his
have the
point,
ability.
and then you can ask, please.
If you
He's rehashing
pigeonhole-
something that he's walked back.
No. What do you mean walk? If you pigeonhole someone to a question and they give you an answer with a caveat and then you complain about the caveat, like I can't help you.
You
I'm an
used that
academic.
caveat earlier. I asked you about that caveat. You walked the caveat back. Now you're using the same exact caveat again. That's wasting all of our time.
How you
STEM
mean?
degrees and
What
their
caveat?
consequences. Am I right?
Gambit, really quick. Why did they walk it back before? If we're gonna pull them on the feet, why
I
did
didn't
they
walk
it
it back.
Because he said it
Wick
wasn't-
clarified
because
that
he
it
said
was
wasn't
systemic.
generally applicable. He said, wait.
No,
Actually,
they're related
let's
to identity and culture.
Let GSU answer, please, because I want
Excuse
to
me.
know too. GSO.
Okay. Earlier we talked through this thing about people not having access to infinite schools and infinite teachers, even at the limited amount of schools they do have access to.
Sure.
You agree that it's unreasonable that's not applicable to most people, so it's unreasonable to bring that up in the conversation as if that's the case, right?
What's the it in that sentence?
The people having unlimited access to different teachers and being able to just go to the next school. The thing
I
that you were
understand
just
that
bringing
there-
up again.
I understand that there are barriers. I'm saying, and that's not, you're missing my point. I'm saying parents have access. They are able to talk and to and wield power. They have if you think that one of the biggest complaints teachers have is that administrators don't listen to them anymore. They only listen to parents. Parents have so much power in the classroom. It is extremely difficult to get class size down. It's been at 30 forever. It's insane. Please make it
What
stop.
does that have to do with parents? Class size?
No, I'm just saying that the power structure has left teachers generally. And so parents often do have access to teachers and how they're doing their thing and their pedagogy.
Look at Florida.
disconnected systemic
Florida's a prime
things and then
example of this.
blaming parents.
What I'm saying is
Wait.
that parents have access, and if they disagree with it, they can raise a ruckus. They can say, this is not okay with the instruction of our child. And this is why you won't see this as a widespread systemic issue, because if there is ever a vocal minority that's over 30%, let's say, of parents, then administration's absolutely going to listen to those kids and say, hey, teacher, this is a really difficult issue. We might have to get legal involved to figure out where exactly your rights end and the students' rights begin.
And you have a problem with that, right?
I think it's a place of learning. This is how.
No, that's what I'm saying. You have a problem with that level of influence, right? So what I'm gonna say, and I think this is relevant, we need to then agree that the problem is the amount of social influence that these authorities have against one another, and that the more that we stoke the flame of difference on this, the more that there's going to be conflict between those authorities.
Who's stoking the flame?
If you make the classroom a political space,
It's inherently political.
This is inherent.
Always going to be
Okay,
political.
you can
It
say
is.
it's inherently political. Listen, there's a way that people can have a okay, how about this? If you make the classroom a partisan space against the interests of the people that are in the parents, then what you are actually doing is a disservice to your own position because you were going to get thrown out of academia. So instead, people
Well,
are
we need
supposed to
teachers
try and
union,
figure out
baby.
you're going to have to figure out what the overlap is between these people in order to teach and sustain yourself inside of that position. Your influence and being able to talk about pronouns and be progressive, it's going to be actually better for progressive policies if they're not making it so that it's a big poster on the wall that then makes it so that the teachers have a PTA meeting where it's like, well, guess what? You're actually this yada yada liberal, and we get 35% of the teachers
Can I ask you, Tuna, do you think that there's any situation or subject or thing that should be taught even if parents decide they don't want it? Even if 30%, 50%, even 70% of the parents decide, hey, we're going to make a stink about this. Do you not think that there are some subjects, some lessons, some classes still worth teaching?
No,
What a
I
great
absolutely
question.
think that I think that there need to be standards being applied on a governmental level as opposed to from the parent level.
That doesn't answer my question, though.
Yeah, there absolutely. Sorry, I answered yes, and then I.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, I thought you were saying yes. I was addressing you
about it. Yeah, I definitely think that like it doesn't matter how many parents decide that math is the devil. Kids should learn math because it gives them logic. The first bill that existed in regards to educational standards, making it so that everybody had to learn to write and read, was actually originally encouraged. It was about this idea that if you can't write and read, then you can't read the Bible. That means that you're the devil's plaything.
Why is he saying it backwards?
We moved from that, but there's still the heart of something there, which is the idea that you become extremely subject
then
to
I guess I'll ask.
corruptible influence.
I understand. I guess I'll ask. Sorry.
You have to read nutrition.
Yeah, exactly. I have to eat my cookies. They're delicious.
Tuna.
Well, maybe you'll ask what I'm going to ask Luca if you want to ask him. Go ahead.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, sure. I was just wondering, given that that's the case, and given that there are more and more people using these neopronouns, it's still a very, very small minority, right? Even if most parents and stuff don't want that to happen, can you not see at least the argument? You may not agree with it, right? I'm not asking you to agree with it, but can you not at least see the argument that some people would be like, hey, this is a societal change that isn't here yet, but we want to work towards it. We want to accelerate towards this place. And so I think that regardless of what 30% of the parents may feel comfortable with, that this is somewhere we want society to go, and so that the classroom, academia, is a place of progress, and so we should at least be doing this, considering that in their minds at least, harm is minimal. Can you not at least understand the breadth of that argument?
I'm gonna say yes, and then I can understand it, and I want to just point out very quickly the reason I disagree with it. The reason I disagree is because I don't think that change actually can be initiated in a top-down way like that. I think that there's always a resistance there, and the reason that them has worked is because it was a bottom-up. The word demanded
a power bottom
step up there.
Yeah, the word expanded into the actual nomenclature of real people. And we were talking about memetics earlier, but memetics are valuable when it comes to spreading the utility of something. And even within the queer community itself, we saw so many people, even just in the microcosm of people who responded to my little tweet about this panel, there were so many people who were disagreeing with the idea that Zzer has even a utility in trans spaces or in queer spaces. And so if we are not unified on any level as to this having utility, and we are seeing it enforced upon children to learn it and utilize it anyway for one particular person, that's not a utility to me that is large enough to warrant crossing a line that's already been dotted with they them.
The utility is that as young learner when we learn to respect the whole person. And unfortunately, in school, the hardest part about it is that we have to learn to respect authority figures even when they're stupid and wrong and completely dumb, which happens a lot. I don't know what to tell you. Like, the respect goes both ways, and I do take your point, Johnny. I do take your point. Like, I mean, if even the trans community is struggling to find utility in it, it presses the point. It makes this likely to be a small thing that we talk about for a small, brief time, and we move on, just like those young learners. I don't see this as becoming a widespread systemic thing, but it's interesting to talk about the enforcement of language from authority figures. So I can sympathize with
Can
that.
I ask you a
Exactly, yeah.
derailing question?
Go ahead.
Do you have a problem with the word student? I noticed that you even corrected yourself. I'm just wondering if it seems intentional.
Yes, I'm finishing my master's of education, and learner is more inclusive because there are adult learners who don't want to be students, right? They're adults. They're just
Wait.
learning a thing.
Sounds a
Can you
bit
explain this to
infantilizing.
me?
No, I know. I
It's just a more
get it. I just
talking about
wondered-
language change. You know, like even
I
the title of
understand.
my job has a new title. Like
I am a student at 39, right?
Yeah.
Like I am still a
Cool.
student. I didn't think that was like a age thing.
No.
Am I wrong here? Am I missing something?
maybe it's not like an
full
age.
ATM.
In academia, okay, talk about masturbatory logic. Academia is masturbatory, right? Like neologisms, coming up with new shit. Look, I wrote a new paper and put these two, ideas together. Is it a big surprise that there's a teacher
no,
who?
because the idea is that you're also benefiting others. So it's not masturbatory. It's mutually helpful. But yeah,
The
keep going.
learners are benefiting by learning respect. The whole person.
It comes time
by
to
the demands.
respect.
And it's benefiting society. What's up? Go ahead.
Is it respect or is it obedience?
It's empathy.
It's empathy.
It's not just empathy though, right? Because empathy requires that you have a sort of
It's not just, but
understanding.
do you see understand?
No,
what
you
would
can
be some of
empathize
those-
with a person without directly being able to know their experiences because they're a human being in front of you or adjacent to you. You don't have to
Okay.
know the exact experience they're going
Hi,
through.
Mushi Mushi.
Like
I don't
if
think that you need to know the
neopronouns,
exact experience, but I do think that in order for empathy to be
That's the
empathy, it needs to be coming from you and not coming from the ever-present understanding that they are your authority.
You got me.
But these are
Yeah,
kids.
we
yeah.
though.
can't
These are
respect our
kids.
parents
Like, wait.
because
I
they're
agree,
always
Doug.
our
I agree.
authority figures. Can't respect my dad. He's always
No,
gonna have.
no. I disagree. Tuna,
Respect
come on.
is not
Tuna,
empathy.
empathy can be taught, right? Empathy can be taught. We don't naturally empathize with those different than others. In fact, there's been studies that show that most kids are pretty racist. Like, as I say, like they don't like people who look different. They find them scary and things like that. So we have to teach them. We have to teach them empathy. We have to teach like this idea that people, even if they are different, use
With
different
discretion.
pronouns, even if they look different, that they're still human and still something we should identify with, right?
I think that we
I just
model-
disagree with your main assertion here. I
I
think
have
that
a
that's
question for the evil team.
okay.
I
Go
have a
ahead.
question for Team Evil. Do you think if you forced people into an institution which they saw no value and didn't respect, that they would learn empathy for those ideals?
do that all the time.
Sorry, you were breaking up on mine. I didn't hear the whole question.
That's a good question.
Do you think if we place people into an institution in which they're forced to participate in ideals that they find value less, are harmful, that they're likely to come away with sense of empathy for those ideals?
I would have to be demonstrated what harm is being done,
Mm,
which still hasn't been done.
No. If they perceive harm, you don't. I'm not playing this game with you where we say the same thing 10 times. So if a person perceives that something is harmful, I didn't ask you, do you think it's harmful? I said if a person perceives something as harmful and they're forced into an institution in which they must participate, do you think it's likely that they'll learn empathy for those ideas that they're being forced into?
Dog, I lived through the early 2000s when they tried to ban Harry Potter because they thought it was teaching kids witchcraft. Okay, just because someone thinks that harm is being done, it needs to be demonstrated.
Maybe we should have listened,
I
right?
think
Maybe
that's-
we
I
should
don't
have
Do you
think
let
think?
them.
that's
Hold
a
on,
big part
do
of
you
the
think the
question.
people? Do you think the people who liked Harry Potter that were forced into an institution and the books taken away because they were considered witchcraft learned empathy for the idea that Harry Potter was witchcraft?
No, because they're being deprived of any ability to be able to empathize with those ideas. Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
I
It's
disagree
crazy when you
completely.
deprive people the ability to actually empathize with other people, and you say no, you can't actually do that. That they don't have the ability to empathize. That's fucking nuts, isn't it?
Just go an inch farther. You're so close. Dude.
Please,
Guys,
take
no,
me
I
over the
think
edge,
these are
please.
different
I'm
concepts.
fucking
Mike.
edging right now. Please. Oh my God,
bring
please
this
finish me, please. Come on, I'm right here. Please, come on, finish me.
I
No
think these are different
cooming on
concepts.
Maine. No cooming on Maine, gang. This
No,
is a
fuck you.
rule.
I
Is this an
wanna coom.
origin
Come on.
now? What's happening?
He wants to masturbate. That's what
Yes,
neopronouns
yes.
are.
Yeah, you brought
He
it up.
wants to masturbate.
Please, come on. I'm right here. Please,
No,
just
okay.
Point.
let me bust. Let me
That's
bust.
probably a connection between the use of neopronouns and lack of sex.
Let me help him bust.
What?
Par for the course.
Probably.
Let me get-
Probably
Yeah,
out
no,
there
no,
somewhere.
No, stop.
Citation
I
video.
want
I'm
to know
joking.
just
At
use
least source
connection
transcript.
between
I'm
lack
memeing.
of sex and neopronouns.
No,
I want
I'm
this.
memeing.
Go ahead,
No,
explain.
it went well with the masturbatory meme, so I said it.
Okay, fair enough. It was
Okay.
me.
Go ahead.
Tuna.
Tuna. Sorry, I
Yeah,
forgot your
you're
name. Go ahead, Tuna. Show the
You're good.
sticky note. I'll address it.
No, yeah. I mean, I showed the sticky note multiple times. I'm just going to say the sticky note this time.
Okay.
So empathy is modeled. It is not a top-down thing. The thing about empathy that's so good, there are different forms of teaching. And I think the most important part of teaching, right, is that the person that is the authority, especially in the adult child, they are taking on the role of parent. They are doing essentially the Evo psych or whatever you want to fucking call it. There are different arguments. But the point is, when I empathize with you, when I go to you and I model that for you, then when you become put into that role of the adult later on, the person who is the authoritator giving down, that is when empathy has its most important function, and that's how you teach it. The difference between, say, the Harry Potter situation, where somebody has like, you're not allowed to read that book, and this is why. It's kind of like this, like the seatbelt. Hey, buckle up, because it's the law. That's not a good model of teaching. What you need to do is go to a person and from a place of care and a place of concern for them individually. And when you enforce something as a rule, you're not actually going straight to the heart of them. You're not saying,
Didn't
hey,
the seatbelt stuff work though? Like, let's look at cigarettes for example. That worked. The enforcement of cigarettes not being allowed in public spaces and things like that.
I had to read Catcher in the Rye
no, okay,
as a
so
kid.
we would have to pull up the data, and this is its own thing. I personally think that seatbelts, I think that talking about
I could be wrong. I think it worked though.
Talking about the risks associated with not using your seatbelt, I think was actually the messaging that was more effective. It's the idea that if you don't wear a seatbelt, you're going to die, and you're going to go through a windshield, and you're going to be mauled like a child in a blender. It's not saying don't do it, wear your seatbelt because it's the law. That is not as effective, in my opinion, as going to the heart of the person and saying, "Hey, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to get hurt."
What if we
Going to
just
the heart
ask
of the
people to wear
person,
seatbelts
going
really
to the-
nicely?
Going to the
That's
heart
your
of the
opinion.
person and asking for empathy from that person is an individualized choice. And the thing about empathy is that it's a choice. And what Tuna is saying here is that this model of enforcing a made up word in a weird grammatical structure onto students who are already trying to learn other really utilitarian important things is not empathetic to those students, and it doesn't encourage empathy from those students. It is a forced thing.
No, okay. I need to address the sticky note. Empathy can be coerced into people. Desegregation, everyone was resistant to it.
That
But
was
then,
so
because of
racist.
exposure to other experiences and other people of different backgrounds, empathy was brought about. That is how empathy is taught, through experience and through being adjacent to people who don't come from different backgrounds than you. This idea that it can't be coerced is nonsense. Do I prefer that it is not coerced? Yes. But historically speaking, we kind of have to for some things.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
mean,
even saying
never become a
We have
minority.
to
Just
do this.
Just hey,
That's the
one at a time.
question.
One at a time. But just to kind of give you guys a little background here, that's called contact theory. It's a little more involved than that, but what Gremloe's referring to is a thing. It's a scientific study. Again, there's more to it, but that's good enough for Gremloe. I do have one more question to Team Evil, and we are kind of running out of time here. So as I understand it, and please correct me, Team Evil, if I'm wrong, but your argument seems to be based on the fact that language evolves, languages change, languages and meanings of words and honorifics can shift in a culture and over time. Is that generally correct? Is that generally what I'm hearing? Is that an accurate representation?
Yes.
Kind
Yes.
of.
Mostly?
Seems alright.
Yeah, for
okay.
the most part.
Okay.
I think.
So, with that said, do you imagine a world, right? So given that all that's true, and that's all that you are arguing, right? Can you imagine a world where slurs become not slurs anymore, where suddenly language is sifted, meaning has changed over time, so that the N word or the R slur or the F slur is
Or
no
queer.
longer
What's the R slur?
something we have to worry about.
Somebody use, anyways,
Ableist slur.
ableist slur, yeah.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
I like that.
The proposition you're making is gonna remain a hypothetical because it's really hard to divorce a word from its history. Like we have etymology,
Like they, them,
words.
or
It's
as a hypothetical,
They,
we can
them is-
acknowledge that theoretically it can happen.
fair enough. Okay, I was
Yeah.
just curious.
And yeah, I think like that if that ever happens, that's just what it's going to be. Like we don't really have like
Words
a
are weird.
conscious choice as individuals. On a systemic level, words change and we just have to deal with it.
Would you
Twerk was not a
support it?
word 20 years ago and now it is. So
Would y'all support a teacher declaring, racial epithets as their neopronouns and forcing students to use it?
No,
presently, of
that's
course,
All
not.
of
unprofessional.
Team Evil?
That's
Gremloe,
unprofessional. That's
you're a little bit
I'm
quiet
sorry,
here.
I can't really like catch what you're saying. There's like a lot of gain. Am I okay with forcing people to do what?
If somebody used like racial slurs as their neopronouns, would you be okay with that?
It was actually interesting. I was going to use that as a hypothetical against your argument earlier. But yeah, obviously, like there are differences between someone using a historical, like, derogatory term to describe themselves and asking people to do it, and that is different than someone, using a made-up word that doesn't have any historical connotations.
or even take fade.
Wait,
like,
but you said they're different, but you specifically didn't answer if you'd be okay with it.
Yeah, I would not be okay with it because those things are different.
he's going for the clip.
Okay, cool.
why is
But
that?
we
No, no,
have,
I just
we
Go for the
have,
clip!
like-
Go for the clip!
Somebody clip that.
Listen, we don't
We
have to
have
go
an
into like
exact
the the
example of
right
that.
anarchists really want to say the N-word meme, okay?
Johnny,
That's what
We-
happens
please.
with a lot of
Okay,
these
okay.
things.
We have an example of this happening, and it happened because of utility. The word queer, which is what I use generally to refer to myself and what a lot of my friends use to refer to themselves, is an umbrella term that for a long time was used as a slur after being used utilitarian. So first it was a utilitarian category, then it became a slur, and now it's become a reclaimed word where we use it for ourselves and other people use it for us as a category, because queer as a word meaning off of the normal or slightly off the beaten path as a already established definition is utilitarian and useful. Therefore, we reclaimed it. Like there was a reason for that. It wasn't like someone just made up a whole new word or anything like that.
Yeah, but it's not
Okay.
a pronoun.
Like my whole
Why can't it
and
be a
we don't want to
pronoun?
turn this into a grammatical thing, I know, but my whole problem with this that encompasses all the other problems is that this is not an already established language, and so we're trying to use it in a way that still doesn't have any definitional value even when you do use it.
She's talking about instrumentality.
Okay.
Why did you just try to gatekeep neopronouns and say that queer can't be a pronoun?
We're memeing at this
Wait,
point.
I mean, if someone
We're-
wants to
No,
use
no,
a
this is
pronoun, they
serious.
could,
Woo!
but it's more of a descriptor than anything else.
No, queer is like a descriptor. It's an adjective, or it's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
group.
Verb.
But it can be a pronoun too, right? It can be a neopronoun.
Anything can be a pronoun,
it could,
but it is
yeah.
not
Theoretically,
used in
yeah.
common parlance
What the
as
word neo
a
means.
pronoun.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
no,
what neo.
no neopronoun is used in common parlance.
That's
For
why
people
it's
who
called a
use
neo
neopronouns, they
pronoun.
are.
It's new.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
literally
weird
like what
circles.
It's in the word.
prefix on it is. It's
Yeah.
neo, new.
Okay. We are coming at the end of the main segment here. Do I want to do an open? Yeah, I'll do an open. You guys can stay if you want. I want to give you though before we go, I just wanted to thank you, all my guests, for mostly behaving yourselves. You were all excellent. Easy moderation job today. appreciate that. I want to thank my audience for being here. Gang, if you are watching this on YouTube, because I forgot to stream to YouTube, so we'll probably get this up there at some point, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're watching it on Twitch, hit that follow button if you haven't, and make sure you give me bits, subs, all that. I can't do this
Money
for free,
me,
gang.
money
We
me
live in
now?
a capitalist structure, and I
Hey,
need to
give them
I
to
don't
me
know how to do
too.
this.
yeah, give them to Johnny for setting this up. Johnny, once again, bears all the credit for the topic and the
topic.
guest list. They made this job very, very easy for me. Very, very easy for me. So I appreciate the trust that you placed in me for that. What do we got coming up, gang? Tomorrow, we have a very heavy subject. We're going to talk about the obesity epidemic. Okay, we're going to have Straighterade, we're going to have nicotine, we're going to have a few others on there. Should be an interesting discussion. I hope you all join me at 6 p.m. Eastern
Bless you.
tomorrow. Next week, I'm mostly taking off. I need some mental health days, okay? So I'm
beans.
mostly taking
Ice beans is
next
getting
week
in on
off,
it.
except for Wednesday.
Chatter.
Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I know it's a weird time for me, but we're going to have Femcel versus Incel. We're going to
Wow.
have Kidology versus Irrelevant, and they are going to have a
Wow.
one-on-one conversation. We will see
Really?
how that goes. It will be fun. It will be interesting, and I am excited that they reached out to me to moderate for that. That will be fun. Yeah, but I want to give everyone here a chance to have a say and to shout themselves out, and I want you to follow every single person on here. And we're going to start with Be Weird. Take it away, Be Weird.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for having me. Thanks again for organizing this, Johnny, Wick. So yeah, I think my closing argument remains the same as my opening. Although language can be messy and weird, teachers are pretty good stewards in the classroom. They're professionals and they're able to, teach new language along with respect and empathy. You can catch me at twitch.tv/beweird. I'm a slam poet from Montreal. Should be trying to live stream our poetry slam this Saturday at 9. Should be wild and fun and goofy. Thanks so much. I'll see you later.
Cool. The only thing I know of the culture is they do the snaps. That's all.
Yeah.
But
If somebody
thank you for
loses
being
this, okay, I'll explain later.
Thank you. Next up, we have Gremloe, please.
Thank you, Johnny and Wicked for having me on. I think this first of all, I don't think this a conversation that even needs to be had, but also I think it did demonstrate what being devoid of empathy is like. But anyway, I'm live every day, 7 a.m. Central Standard Time on twitch.tv/Gremloe, news, politics, reacts. We love talking politics and empathy and coming and all that fun stuff.
Thanks for being here. I've been trying to get you on my show for a little bit now, so I appreciate you coming through. That was great, and I hope you enjoyed it. Go give them a follow, gang, if you're up that early. It's not my time zone, but hey, some of us are early birds. Next up, GSUGambit, please.
Yeah, I was happy to be here. I was happy when I saw the conversation Johnny was having on Twitter. Happy when she reached out. Happy that Wick was moderating. I hadn't been on a Wick show yet, and that was on my list of things to do. So it was pretty cool. Yeah, I'm even happy for Team E with some of the evil ideas y'all expressed today. But no, I'm happy it was a civil conversation. I thought it was gonna go much more left. And not left in the sense of political, but yeah, I'm happy that I was able to express a few ideas about how you have empathy for people who have a disagreement over feelings, and you don't try to force them to do things that aren't of value to them, and you shouldn't force other people to be masturbatory objects for your pleasure. So yeah, I was happy to express that opinion today, and hopefully everybody understood it.
GSU, thank you for being on my show. I'll reach out to you more often. Hopefully this didn't ruin it for you, right? A little more civil than people expect sometimes, but I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. The yelly screamy is fun to a point. Next up, we have JohnnyScarlett.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And
was a
all
lot of
of
fun.
you are people
was a lot better
that
than last time.
I expected to
Lot less
have
silly.
a civil conversation like this. And so I'm glad you didn't let me down, dudes. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to everybody who responded positively or negatively. We got to have a really interesting conversation, and that was my goal. So if you've never seen me before, if you're watching through Wick or somebody else, hi, I'm Johnny. I'm an educational streamer, and I also want to say thank you so much, Graham, for those 2 gift subs in my channel just now.
Okay, so Johnny, thank you again. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I shouted her out And I've been shouting the others with the Nightbot command, but I'm going to give Johnny pride of place here and actually do the shout out thing for her. So good, give her a follow. Next, Luca. And Luca, I don't even know your socials or anything, so you're going to have to tell me where we can find you and things. So go ahead, Luca.
I gotcha. I'm Luca. You can find me on Twitter at honestlyunusual. Pretty easy tag to remember. I'm a writer and an amateur fighter. I don't have a lot going on right now. I actually just got laid off of my primary job, so writing is basically my big people job now. I have a lot more time to argue on Twitter, hoping that I can come back here sometime and have fun like I did today, even if I didn't get to say as much as I'd like. I think everybody made some pretty cool points, and then everybody also made a couple of bad ones along the way, even the evil side that I had to be on.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for being a last-minute replacement. Really, really appreciate you. Next up, and gang, give them a follow. I put their Twitter tag in the chat, so go use it. Next up, another last-minute replacement, but someone who I think did very well for being here last minute. Tuna Chip, please.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Tuna chip, just like the 2 fucking food items. No frills, no thrills. Maybe slight thrills. I'm here on Twitch. You can find me on Twitter at Tuna Chip TV. Real easy shit. We stream on Saturday, Sunday, and Tuesday 9. Oh, actually, we switched 8 p.m.
into the chat,
Eastern.
into the fight there,
pretty consistently talking about a lot of things, but mostly the sort of like knives edge between philosophy and politics. So come by, talk about some shit. We do open calls sometimes, and otherwise cover topics.
Yeah, Tuna Chip's great, gang. He has been on my show a few times, and every time I'm always thrilled to have him, even if I really disagree with him. He's fun to talk to. So give him a follow, gang. And like I said, that's the show, so you guys can stay if you like. If you need to go, that's fine too. We're gonna take some calls, and so it's up to you. Go ahead.
One small thing. I have been to the future, so I did want to let your audience know that Irrelevant is gonna body Kidology in this conversation next Wednesday, but they should tune in to see it live. But just giving a heads up for everybody to just be aware of what's gonna happen.
Oh man,
yeah.
It's gonna be bad.
Invest in relevant coin is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Go.
I don't know.
Wow.
For sure.
You couldn't pay me to watch that conversation.
But you can pay me to watch that conversation. So you can give me love, you can give me bit. Okay, so there's quite a few people in here. We're gonna take 1 or 2 at a time.
I'm gonna dip out. It's taco night.
Thank you again, and have fun with your tacos. Bye.
Bye, everybody.